Book number 5, Stephen King makes his second appearance on my GoodReads challenge for 2019 with Cycle of the Werewolf. This is a very short book, but I enjoyed it. I wasn't really going for big books for my first GoodReads challenge. I was just wanting to read, and I've always wanted to read this one. There's 12 chapters in all. Each chapter is a different month of the year, starting in January and in December, and it tells the story of a werewolf kind of attacking this town and this boy who kind of suspects a member of the community to be a werewolf. And it's almost like a children's book a little bit, and just the way it kind of has some like pictures and stuff like that, and just like the way the wording is, it feels very children's book-ish, and I loved it. This was a very good short book. I just had an afternoon, or actually I read it at night. I was just bored, laid on the couch, and I really wanted to read something, but I didn't really want to commit to a big book. So I've had this one for a while, and I'm like, it's about time to finally read this, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. If you do just need a quick book to read, I recommend this. This was a lot of fun. I liked the beginning of this book, was so excellent. Just about this guy who's just kind of in a shack all to himself, and this werewolf is just trying to break in, and ultimately it does kill him. But it's just it's fantastic. It's just a lot of fun to read. It's a short, like I mentioned, it's a short book, but it's just a lot of fun. And like, if you just have a couple hours to kill and need something to read, there you go. For book 6 for my GoodReads challenge is Watching Porn and Other Confessions of an Adult Entertainment Journalist by Lindsay G. This was a very fantastic read. I don't really dive into this kind of subject matter, but I was branching out. This was my first GoodReads challenge, and this year I wanted to do all things new. Like with my other goal for 2019 was to watch 150 new movies. I was watching movies I have never thought I would watch, or things I would probably like pass by, like, that just looks just doesn't look interesting. So I wanted to branch really out and just read everything, and this was a really good read in my opinion. It was just her and her behind this, her telling her experience on reviewing porn, and her talking about the types of videos that she reviewed and how she approached it. She approached everything very straight. She didn't, there were some puns here and there, but she took it very seriously in telling her story, and like on why she did the things that she did, like the way she approached a certain subject, or the way she approached a star in this world, and how she wrote. I just really thought this was a very adult way of handling this subject matter. It was a very, like, just the way she kind of fell into it, and how just what led to writing the book, and just I really liked it, all of it. It was just a really good read. It was different. Not, like I said, I don't normally read these kind of books, but another one will appear for my final book of the year. But these are just fun to read because they're just fascinating. It's just I'm trying to think of what really made that one stand out. Like I said, just her way of putting fact into what she was doing. Like, I'm kind of citing some real life instances, and like maybe this happened and this happened, which led to like why she wrote this or that, and it's just, I really like that. And I'm trying to keep this clean because due to the subject matter, but there is just a lot of sometimes graphic detail a little bit here and there, but overall it was a good read. It really was. Book number 7 is my third appearance of Stephen King, Eyes of the Dragon. Now, I have read all the Dark Tower books, and now since I've completed them and took the Path of the Beam and reached the Dark Tower, now I'm kind of reading everything that has a really strong connection. I don't want like oh, this has like a minor connection. I'm reading stuff that has a very strong connection to it, like Eyes of the Dragon, Insomnia, Salem's Lot, like characters that show up in those books, or major characters, or like in this one, Randall Flagg, who is the kind of the bad guy in this book, who is the bad guy in The Stand, and who is a very prominent force in the Dark Tower series. And this was one I have been wanting to read. I think this one's very underrated. You don't hear ones really talk about this one all too much. They always go for the most obvious ones. Stands, the Dark Towers, The Shining, a few Carrie, those. But you don't hear them talk about this particular one all too often. And this one is really good. Like Cycle of the Werewolf I mentioned earlier, this one is kind of more of a fairy tale, and this one does have a little bit more of a children's aspect to it, but this one still has some adult moments in there, and it's a lot of fun. And I purchased this book on Thrift Books, and it's because I could never find this one in the wild. When it comes to Stephen King books, I have to find them in the wild. That's part of the fun. So, but this one I had to kind of seek help elsewhere. But overall, I enjoyed the story. It's about Roland, not that Roland, but he dies, who is the king of this world, and his two sons are kind of thrusted in different aspects. One was charged with the murder of him, and one, who was the youngest, is kind of being manipulated by Flagg, who is the sorcerer of the world, because the magic does exist. And it's a lot of fun, and everything is just told excellently. It's a really good one. Out of all the Stephen King books I've read this year, that one's my favorite. So, book 8 for my GoodReads challenge is Not That Kind of Girl by Lena Dunham. I am a big fan of hers, her TV show Girls, and her movie Tiny Furniture. That was my first foray into Lena Dunham, was watching Tiny Furniture. And I found this book at all places, at this used bookstore down in Nashville, where quite a few of these books that I have shown on this video came from. So I picked this up and I loved it. I'm a sucker for a good story, or stories, and that's what mainly these books that I'm reading this year are, just a collection of different ranges of stories. I tend to kind of stick to the one subject matter, which is horror, but I wanted to branch out so bad this year, and this is no other. This was just a nice collection of her telling stuff that's happened in her life, the loss of her virginity, to her internet boyfriends and stuff like that, and just like the way she describes everything is very unique. Kind of like how Brian Posehn, he has a very unique comedic style. Chris Jericho has a very unique wrestling style. Even Stephen King has a very way of like making a simple walk to the fridge last 80 pages. It's just like every book I've read this year has a very unique voice, and this one definitely stands out in that category, because her voice definitely is a funny one, and that's what I really liked. And I really needed kind of more of an upbeat one after reading Eyes of the Dragon, which was a little bit more serious. So I kind of decided, like, you know what, let's go back to the realm of nonfiction and just read some collection of stories by someone who I'm a fan of. So I recommend this one. It reads pretty fast, so that's it. Book 9 is John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. And I've always known the essential plot line to this, but I've never read it, and I really wanted to have at least one literary classic on my list to kind of make my whole list kind of validated a little bit, you know. All he's doing is reading nerdy things in Stephen King, you know. But I really wanted to have at least one, like, okay, he read a classic on my list. But like I said, I've always known the story. You know, essentially, it's what I just liked it. I really wanted to read it just to kind of get a little bit more detail on what I already know and what transpired and what other characters were saying and stuff like that. And I thought it was fun. I read it in an hour or so. I had I had like an hour to kill, so I read it, and it was just fun. I learned a few things that I didn't realize went down. I didn't realize what happened before the big event of the story, because it follows these two guys, one who has a mental handicap, and he's quite strong, and he doesn't quite know how to be careful, you know, and so he's a little rough, and he ends up getting people killed, and some animals are harmed, and so ultimately a decision had to be made. And I didn't realize what happened before all that. So I was like, oh, okay. And some like secondary characters, what they were talking about. And like, I didn't realize this happened and this happened. I'm like, oh, so it was very fun to read. I really liked that. So for my final book, book 10 of my GoodReads challenge is Sinner Take All by Tara Patrick. She is an adult entertainment. She's a porn star, and unlike the previous book I read in the year, which was more about the reviewing side of things, like how like the people who help make her famous, you know, like the people who review the DVDs and the movies, and do the interviews and stuff like that. This one is about the star themselves, and this was a very interesting read. My only problem with this book was that it seemed a little bit more broad. I really wished it had a little bit more detail in some areas. It kind of went over it a little bit. I mean, some of the more interesting things that I would like to have known, she couldn't talk about. Like, I really wanted to know what went down with a contract dispute with this company that she signed on to, which resulted in a bad deal and stuff like that. But I understand the legality of it all. But it was very interesting. Like, she left home at 14, traveled to Tokyo, and did modeling there, which by herself, and which she kind of ran wild, and she came back, did modeling, kind of she kind of failed at modeling, and she became a nurse. Kind of like she had an incident with a bedpan, and then she just kind of started doing some nude modeling, which led to performing on video and stuff like that, and just one thing after another. And it was just a really interesting read, and it was just fun. And there were some things that were like, oh, I didn't see that coming, or like, even though she pointed it out, but I'm like, sometimes I kind of shut that part of the brain off. I just read, and I just don't try to get too far ahead of the story, which I try to do so much. Sometimes I can't help it, but this one I probably should have picked up on it, but I didn't. But I was lucky to kind of shut that part of the brain off. So it had a really good story. I enjoyed it. I mean, it was nice to read about someone who was in front of the camera rather than behind the camera. And various points that she really was behind the camera as well, making her own movies and like making her own company and stuff like that. It was all very, very interesting. I was just like the icing of the cake for my reading venture for 2019 was I just wanted stories. Regardless of background, race, creed, social status. I just wanted to read everything and anything. I know I have a few Stephen King books in there because I've been trying to work through his back catalog. But just overall, I enjoyed all my books. My favorite book probably is, like I mentioned, Chris Jericho. My least favorite is probably End of Watch. Maybe maybe Casino Royale, but just I think In the Watch kind of took that place overall, just because I was just more disappointed in that one particular element in the book. So that is my goal, my first goal of the year that I completed. I will talk about my other goal at the beginning of January, because I still have to map out how I'm going to do this, because some months were bigger than others. So, movie watching. So, I hope you enjoyed this. Please click subscribe and hit the bell to stay notified for any future videos for this YouTube channel. I know I'm very sporadic, but when I do, I try to make them really great content. So, as usual, I am the one and only MSJ, Max for short. Thank you for watching this video, and I'm going to go geek out.